Hey guys, welcome back to the Bitcoin Fortress podcast. This is episode 178, recorded here on August 24th, 2025. We are at block height 911507, Moscow time 874. Fees are 1, 1, and 1. We are Bitcoin only, no altcoins or shitcoins, as I like to call them. No distractions. Today we've got about 20 fresh new segments to talk about: policy shifts, lightning adoption, miners diversifying, treasury updates, and even a few OPSEC reminders. All Bitcoin, all Signal. Let's get into it. First up in the news, the Department of Justice announced it will no longer routinely pursue money transmitter charges against developers who merely write or publish code. Well, this is a big deal. They're creating a distinction between building tools, which is legal, and running custodial services, which is regulated. This should help US based Bitcoin wallet and Lightning developers innovate without fear of prosecution. But, and this is a big one, there's still a risk if the code is deliberately designed to aid crime or if the developers provide custodial services. And of course, if they taunt the government by saying that criminals are using their product, well, that's probably not very smart. But it does encourage more Bitcoin dev activity to remain inside the US, so we'll take this as a positive. Next in the news, the Federal Reserve ended its special unit devoted to scrutinizing banks engaging in crypto. Bitcoin custody and settlement now fall under normal supervisory channels for the banksters. This removes stigma that kept regional banks from experimenting with Bitcoin services. Of course, the ones that were got punished last March, as we remember, with Signature Bank. A symbolic normalization is occurring here, I think. Bitcoin is no longer treated as an alien, and they don't have to banks don't have to be super careful with the regulators like they used to. Although it doesn't guarantee a quick rollout, banks are still going to have to manage risk and demand, and you know, they're slow and they take forever and they suck. But they will figure it out and it'll take some time. But again, I'll take that as a positive. Global banking associations have urged Basel to revisit strict capital rules for holding crypto. So the current rules require a one for one capital for Bitcoin exposure, which is very unattractive to banks because it ties up a lot of their money, and they like to have not a lot on their balance sheet so they can loan out and do all kinds of crazy stuff with. So the industry wants Bitcoin to be treated like commodities or foreign exchange instead of toxic assets, which is kind of how it's being treated today. If this is reformed, it could allow banks to hold Bitcoin in treasuries, which is kind of an interesting thought. Um, believe it when I see it. And of course, Basel reviews are slow, but the momentum is shifting. So, again, another little positive bit of news. The IRS official who leads the digital asset reporting rules resigned. So what does this mean? Well, it's probably going to delay clarity on the Form 1099-DA and broker reporting, which they're in the middle of rolling out. And there's uncertainty for retail filers and accountants as a result of that. Taxpayers are generally recommended to keep meticulous records regardless. So if you don't have a spreadsheet with all your Bitcoin purchases and sales on it, then you could be in trouble when it's tax time. unless you don't file taxes. And then, of course, this departure highlights how difficult crypto reporting frameworks are to implement. So I'm sure probably just threw up his hands and said, let the other guy handle this. So more to come on that. The acting CFTC chair, Caroline Pham, said the agency is accelerating rulemaking. This signals more oversight of Bitcoin spot market venues. It does confirm Bitcoin's classification as a commodity, not a security. And it could bring stricter transparency and reporting for exchanges and derivatives desks, which will be interesting to see. Generally, this is seen as positive because clearer rules support institutional adoption, as we have heard many, many times. And of course, that means number go up. SoFi is integrating Lightspark's Lightning rails for instant remittances. This is pretty interesting. It allows cheap, instant cross-border transfers using only fiat. Users only see fiat on both ends. So it's using the Lightning Network effectively as the translator between if you're sending dollars to euros or dollars to yen or vice versa or whatever. So pretty cool. This could undercut Western Union and MoneyGram in a $600 billion remittance market. So it's interesting to see that they're still kicking, but uh, maybe not for long with this type of disruptive technology. There's early corridor testing in progress, so we would have to watch the adoption and see what the costs are. But this is proof that Lightning can power mainstream fintech without users even being aware that they're using Lightning. So that's pretty cool. A lot of people have been bagging on the Lightning network that it doesn't work very well and it's clunky and setting up channels and closing channels is a hassle and all that. But the reality is it's a layer two and to Bitcoin and it's working. So, and it's good to see that there's a little bit more adoption happening there. JP Morgan reports that the Bitcoin hash rate is up 4% in early August. And this is really important. US listed miners control 33.6% of the global share of hash rate. So, the good news, of course, is that stronger network security is a good thing. We want to make sure that Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure. But higher competition amongst the mining group squeezes miner margins, which tends to push the little guys out of business and makes the big ones bigger. Concentration in the US is kind of a double-edged sword. Um, it's sort of like transparency versus a regulatory choke point situation. Although what we did see not too long ago was when China outlawed mining, there was a momentary dip in hash rate as those miners relocated to other parts of the world that were more Bitcoin friendly, and then the hash rate just bounced right back. So the incentives for mining are still quite good. And so basically, if a government outlaws it, they're just shooting themselves in the foot. Also notable, a lot of US miners are diversifying into renewable energy, which is a great source of power for Bitcoin mining because it's variable and Bitcoin mining can be variable. And it's also can be remote. So it doesn't require you to be, really anywhere near the grid. And they're also getting into AI hosting, I guess, as a diversification of their business. And that one is, of course, with AI, you always have to be on. You can't ever really shut it down like Bitcoin mining can. And AI needs lots and lots of compute. So you'll probably see more US miners continuing to adopt that business model to grow their business. And of course, investor confidence is shown by continued capex spending by the miners, continuing to build out their infrastructure. So um, all good there. A solo miner found block 910440, earning 3.137 Bitcoin. It is extremely rare today at today's difficulty levels, but possible for solo miners to be able to find a block. And so, if you don't have a BitX, they're cheap. I mean, it's like $100 or something, and you can literally just there's a bunch of different uh, makers of it. I think I got a solo Satoshi, but there's lots of other ones. You just plug it in, set it up, connect it to your Wi-Fi, and just you know let it run. You're supporting the network. You may not get any Bitcoin out of it, but it's a good thing to do. Run a node and run a BitAx. But again, getting back to this, this is proof that decentralization still exists. Anyone with hardware can compete. And we should definitely, as Bitcoiners, try to support decentralization by doing home mining. And now it's so cheap and easy to do. It doesn't even really use that much electricity either, because these miners are very efficient. Um, but it does illustrate also why there's pools, because a lot of folks want to get a steady income out of their mining investment. So by pooling your hash rate, you can increase your chances of getting a reward. Interesting thing is, I think some people are now starting to effectively pool their solo miners. So like little groups can now you have to trust the wallet, obviously, of the person that's pooling all of the resources. But if you do, and all this hash power gets pointed to the wallet, and the wallet and that particular that group of mining hash power finds a block, then theoretically everybody in that little group will share in the reward. I'm not really a big fan of that, but some people like to do that. And the final thing, of course, is hobbyist miners remain a part of Bitcoin's story. And I guess that would include me because I am a hobby miner. But anyway, good to see that people could still plug in a little solo miner and get a block reward. TeraWulf signed a $3.7 billion AI hosting deal backed by Google. 200 plus megawatts of capacity has been committed to AI while continuing Bitcoin mining. Google's backing legitimizes Bitcoin miners as data center operators because they're obviously a big company, tech monopoly. Don't do evil. And then this also provides revenue stability across Bitcoin cycles, like we were talking about earlier, for the miners. Gives them a little bit more resilience in their business. Of course, the concern is if AI hosting becomes more profitable, maybe Bitcoin mining focus could shrink, and that's definitely a risk. But there's still money to be made in Bitcoin mining. So again, whatever hash rate leaves one particular miner, somebody will somewhere in the world will pick it up, probably. Next up in the news, Mingxing Group will allocate $483 million to a Bitcoin treasury. So this is pretty interesting news because this adds momentum to Asia's corporate adoption after Japan's MetaPlanet, which is already a fairly well-known Bitcoin treasury company over there. Also, Hong Kong is positioning itself as a Bitcoin financial hub, very much so, and obviously serving a huge market in Asia as well as China itself. And this could pioneer new accounting and custody practices in Asia, which is also quite interesting. And again, goes right back to Bitcoin adoption, which we want to see. And also, finally, demonstrates Bitcoin's globalization at the corporate treasury level. So, uh, very interesting. Good to see. Upcoming conference, Bitcoin Asia 2025, which will be held in Hong Kong, August 28th and 29th, is expected to highlight Lightning Commerce and Asian treasuries. Hong Kong regulators might use this event to signal their support for the industry. It's a good opportunity to compare Asian adoption narratives with Western ETF focus. You could probably expect to see new partnerships and pilot projects. They typically do these things at conferences. And of course, underscoring that Bitcoin remains global and regional events can carry global impact. So uh, I guess if you've got the time and the money, go check it out. Gemini filed for a US IPO showing revenue declines and losses. The public filings bring transparency to exchange operations, which don't sound like they're doing very well, but that hasn't stopped companies from going public before. I certainly remember the dot-com days, and you didn't have to make money. You just had to have a dream and a roadmap, and investors would literally shovel money at you. Not too different to what we're seeing today with the AI frenzy. This reflects fee pressure and competition from ETFs. Also, public listing could rebuild trust after industry scandals. We'll see about that, but I still don't trust exchanges, and nor should you. For Bitcoiners, exchanges are maturing, though many are still alt heavy, and of course, we don't like the shitcoins. The SEC has delayed multiple ETF decisions, including Truth Social's BTC slash ETH fund. Um, Now, this doesn't affect existing spot Bitcoin ETFs, but it does show that the SEC is still a bit cautious on new hybrid products. This also confirms Bitcoin's relatively clearer path versus other assets. And then investors who are seeking pure exposure should just stick to spot ETFs or self custody. And of course, Bitcoin only. Fed Governor Michelle Bowman suggested that the staff should be allowed small crypto holdings. Well, this is interesting. Uh, so, this perhaps is symbolic of some normalization inside the Fed, which is weird. It does promote literacy through hands-on experience, and I can't argue with that. I mean, the best way to learn about Bitcoin is to actually use it to transfer it to different wallets, set up wallets, um, you know, set up different custody configurations. I mean, using something is certainly the best way to learn about it, so cannot disagree with that. And again, this is sort of an additional sign of Bitcoin's steady creep into mainstream finance. And what's more mainstream than the Fed? Not really a policy change, though, yet, but it does reflect a shifting culture at an organization full of really smart people that make really bad decisions. So it's, you know, I don't think there's hope for the Fed, but it's good to see nonetheless. In other news, an investor lost 783 Bitcoin or $91 million dollars in fiat via a social engineering scam. Well, what happened? Attackers impersonated support staff to gain wallet access, and then human error, of course, remains the biggest threat because this person trusted them. So, once again, never share your seed phrases. Never sign blind transactions. I mean, you need to know who you're sending money to. You need to double check the wallet. Some people only check the first and last digits. You should probably, as best practices, check the entire string of the wallet address that you're sending to, because I've heard of some attacks where they've keep the first and last numbers the same and change the middle numbers, and now you're sending it to the wrong place. So just be smart. double, triple check everything before you send coins anywhere. And of course, make sure you know who you're dealing with. Uh, Customer support calling you should never be a thing. And of course, the other thing to remember is wealth attracts attackers. So practice duress protocols and, keep a low profile. You don't need people to know that you own Bitcoin. It's funny, I was talking to my son the other day, and apparently a lot of people in Miami, where he lives, like to flaunt their Bitcoin. They walk around with Bitcoin shirts and Bitcoin hats and everything like that. And that's cool and fun, but it just draws a lot of attention. And do you really want to be the victim of a $5 wrench attack, even if you have good setup, and you can't access your keys? Why put yourself through that? So keep on the down low. India's first Bitcoin only think tank launched on August 15th. We talked a little bit about this last week. This Bitcoin Policy Institute for India seeks to educate officials and lobby for better regulation. India's tax regime, which is a 30% tax on gains and a 1% TDS, are a huge drag. The Supreme Court is pressuring the government for clarity, and with 1.4 billion people in the world's largest remittance market, even some small reforms can matter there in terms of driving Bitcoin adoption. So, again, good to see that. The banking industry is urging lighter rules in both Basel and US Congress. So, there's coordinated pressure now across agencies showing momentum. Banks want a level playing field to compete with native Bitcoin custodians. See, there's money to be made there, and the banks want in on it. You have to follow the incentives. They're not doing this because they support Bitcoin. And again, you'll probably have to expect gradual policy alignment rather than sweeping change. So the changes will probably be incremental, but you'll look back in 5 years and I'm sure the landscape will be quite different. And again, another sign that Bitcoin is moving from an outsider to a normalized financial asset. The question on everybody's mind, of course, is will Bitcoin be co opted into the decrepit and evil fiat financial system? Or is it a Trojan horse that will, bring the change from within? As long as Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure, I'm feeling like I don't really care what they do with it or who buys it or who sells it. Uh, One thing you have to remember about Bitcoin is it's for everyone. It's for your enemies, for your friends, for people you like, for people you don't like, for governments, for big companies, little people. It's pretty much a level playing field. You just have to pay whatever the market price is to get your Bitcoin. And so, you know, the government's going to do what the government's going to do. We already talked about this, but just wanted to reinforce the 33.6% of global hash rate controlled by US miners. Um, This is actually probably a good thing, also in respect to the capital markets access for the mining companies, because by having that much control, that does make it easier for them to raise money and grow their operations. Of course, it does create a lot of political risk in the US, but we talked about this earlier that even if the US decided that they wanted to enact a lot of regulation or controls over Bitcoin mining or even ban it, that would just drive companies elsewhere because we've already seen that happen. So there could be growth again in other places like Africa, Asia, Latin America to sort of rebalance if there is an imbalance caused by political change in the U.S., which it's coming. Every 4 years, it's going to change. It's going to be you're going to have this guy, then you're going to have that guy, and you're going to have this guy, and you're going to have that guy. And it's that's just how it's going to be probably for a while. Uh, Kind of wrapping up on the the what we talked about earlier, as far as the Department of Justice's stance, again, pretty important in terms of having non-custodial software clarified as not a money service. I wonder how this will affect the ongoing litigation, criminal charges against Samurai Wallet. Um, it'll be interesting to see. I think they ended up just plea dealing out, so that's kind of like over now. But maybe they won't go after folks as much as long as they're careful about not, flaunting that they're supporting the illegal use of their product or, in fact, running a money transmitter business. I don't know. I think it's going to be still going to be a little tough sledding for developers, but they are freer to build CoinJoin wallets, Lightning nodes, and PSBT features. And I do think CoinJoin wallets are super important because, almost everything that you're buying now is KYC. And so if you ever want to have your coins be private, you need to run it through CoinJoin so that people don't, it obscures the history, I guess, of your coins. Um, and and you might need that for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's just it's nobody's business, and you don't want the surveillance software to be able to trace everything back to you, just because, not because you're doing anything evil or illegal, but it's just none of their damn business. And so you should have that right. That's why it's really important to understand Bitcoin privacy and really learn all of the privacy techniques that you can use to keep your Bitcoin safe and secure. And there's a lot that you can do. Um, Obviously, address reuse is a big one. Most of the wallets and software nowadays, they'll provide a new address every time you do a transaction, which is great. But it's important to understand those things. Again, custodial services will remain fully regulated, and of course, if they deal with the bad guys, they will be punished without mercy, I'm sure. Again, wrapping up for this week, Bitcoin Asia. Keep an eye on that. Looks like Capital B in Paris raised a Bitcoin only fund backed by Adam Back, so we'll have to check that out. One other thing to watch coming up on August 29th is the $13.8 billion worth of Bitcoin options expiring. So expect to see some volatility there. We definitely saw some, don't talk much about price as you know, but last week, Bitcoin was down 10%, and then the Fed said, hey, we're going to start printing money again. And then it rallied up, and now it's fallen back, but it's still higher than it was before. But I think, and then there's some people saying we're still in a bull market, and there's some people saying we're not, or it's ending. And the signs are there because the OGs are selling. That means we're at a peak, and it's gonna, who cares? Just stay humble and stack sats, and in 5 years from now, you'll be happy. Did want to mention this week's featured Substack post on the Bitcoin Fortress Substack. It's called Filtering the Noise. It's a little simple guide on how to, I'll call it a practical guide to thinking clearly in the age of infinite feeds. So check that out. And if you like it, subscribe. It's free to subscribe. And if you really like it, you can become a paid subscriber. I always appreciate those. It helps me keep the lights on. Did want to also mention the book, Bitcoin Fortress, A Simple Guide for Beginners, available on Amazon, paperback, Kindle, and there's also an audiobook that I narrated myself. Pretty proud of that. So check that out. Link in the show notes for that. And everything that I reviewed this week And that about wraps up episode 178 of the Bitcoin Fortress podcast. We covered some Department of Justice shifts, Fed normalization, lightning remittances, mining updates, corporate treasuries in Asia, and security reminders. So, as always, stay humble, stack sats, and secure your fortress. And with that, I will talk to y'all next week. Bye bye.